The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for our portrait photography webinar with Mikey Grecco. My name is Sai and I'll be your host today. A lot of you might have been on a presentation on GoToWebinar, but some quick housekeeping items before we move ahead. On your screen to the left is the GoToWebinar viewer through which you will see the presentation. To the right is the GoToWebinar control panel where you can select an audio mode and ask questions. Our presentation today will last for about 40 minutes, after which will be open for Q&A. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to enter your questions, and then we'll get to them once the presentation is over. Most importantly, this webinar will be recorded and sent to you via email in 48 hours. Right. With the housekeeping items aside, let's move on to the webinar. We have Michael Grecco with us today, who is a world-renowned celebrity photographer and is well known for his portrait photography around the world. Michael has literally photographed the who's who of celebrity world and is going to show us some of his shots today, which is really exciting. Michael is a Hasselblad Masters Award winner and a SanDisk Extreme team member, and I can go on for a while. But I will let him talk more about his work and also share with us his tips on portrait photography and family portraits. So with no further ado, I will hand it to Michael, who will take us through the presentation.
Thank you, Sai. I am actually a Panasonic Lumix luminary now, so we want to get that straight. Besides being a SanDisk Extreme team member. So I'm going to start the webinar by showing everyone a little bit about me so you understand what I do and what I've done and my history, and I've been doing this a really long time. And then I'm going to take some family photos. Some were actually shot as family photos on an assignment, and some were just those magical, captured, really, truly family photos that a photographer might take. I have to be honest with you. I know how to do them well. I don't, I'm one of those guys, it's like the cobbler's kids have no shoes. I'm one of those guys that because I prepare and like to light things and stage and prop and getting me sometimes to do family photos, but I've picked some really good ones. I think you'll learn a lot from what I have. And so I started as a photojournalist. I learned the darkroom in summer camp as a kid at 12 or 13 years old, picked up a camera, loved it, would swipe the Time Life books from the library, looking at the great masters, looking at Avedon and Penn and Bruce Davidson and all these great photographers, and knew this is what I was going to do. So after having looked at and studied the history of photography as a kid, I went to school and I thought it would be interesting. In BU, there was a nice photojournalism department. I actually thought it would be interesting to study photojournalism. And my first job while I was in college was as a stringer to the Associated Press. This is me here covering Elizabeth Taylor. This is actually one of my first assignments for the Associated Press, getting clubbed over the head by a Boston police officer as I was covering a KKK rally or anti-KKK rally. So, I found the lifestyle very exciting. I was young. I was seeing things I would never see before. I was part of the press pool for the president, traveled with Reagan in the motorcade, and covered a lot of big general news events. This is Hurricane Gloria in Massachusetts, and this is the Seabrook anti-nuclear protests in Seabrook, New Hampshire. And I came at one point to the reality, this is sort of a funny story, I came to a point where while covering this, this was another anti-KKK rally, while covering this event, I had a realization. I was covering this event with P.F. Bentley, who was the Time magazine contract photographer at the time, old friend of mine, and one of the Turnley brothers. I never remember whether it was Peter Turnley or David Turnley. They're both award-winning photojournalists and identical twins. So, but this guy that the rally, that the peaceful, I guess they're not so peaceful with the sign that says death to the Klan, but the guy that the Klansman that they're beating up drives up the hill and starts shooting. And both PF and one of the Turnleys got up and was like, "Where's the gunshot? Where's the gunshot? I need to capture it." And I ducked down and was laying in a ditch. And I sort of realized at that point that photojournalism wasn't at the heart of what I do. I really like to create and conceive and light beautiful imagery, right? So this is a brief history of some of the other stuff I've done. I've done a lot of Time magazine covers and Forbes covers, and these are all highly lit. They're almost the opposite of the family portrait I'm going to talk to you about today. For me, because I like, the lighting is much simpler on a family portrait, and I don't like them too staged, and I don't like them too propped, and I think kids give you especially a magic that just, that's just organic, and it's just really innocent and sincere. So, but this is where I come from. I shot the exclusive, did the only story and exclusive photo shoot for Spielberg when he did Munich. I've shot a lot of Time covers in my career. I've shot covers for Newsweek. I've shot a lot of Forbes covers. This was just last year. The guys from Snapchat, Kathy Ireland, John Chambers of Cisco Systems, Patrick Dempsey for a cover of Forbes Life. And then this past September, I was in Brazil doing a fashion story. I was invited to shoot Brazil's largest designers. So we did a big story, big series of fashion portraits with their gowns and with models of Brazil's largest designers. This was a shoot I had done of Chris Farley just before he passed away that was used for the cover of Entertainment Weekly. And I've shoot all sorts of magazine covers. This is a Psychology Today cover. This is USA Weekend last year with Zach Quinto. And as I say, I love the conceptual. I love putting story elements together. This guy saved his life by becoming a marathon ocean swimmer. This is Chelsea Handler. This was done for one of her book covers. I did the first advertising shoot for the show X-Files. This was another Entertainment Weekly cover. It's Jimmy Smith and Dennis Franz of NYPD Blue, and this was the first cover they did on the show NYPD Blue. And these pictures are all about lighting for me, right? So when in a minute when we get to the family portrait part of this, it's still about lighting, but it's about lighting in a different way. It's like, how do you make natural light work and work to your advantage, right? This is, and I also did a lighting book, Lighting and the Dramatic Portrait, which is on Amazon, and it's on Amazon and it's on iTunes. It's a great ebook. It's got a lot of pictures, diagrams of how I've lit things and how I've conceived a lot of these Hollywood portraits. This is the book cover, Michael Grecco, Lighting and the Dramatic Portrait, The Art of Celebrity and Editorial Photography. And again, all of my stuff is sort of concept and lighting driven. The lighting goes with with the storytelling aspect of the image. This was an inside an arts cover for Time magazine. This was another arts cover for Time magazine of Steve Martin, a portrait session with Martin Scorsese. This is one of my favorite portraits because it's because of his eyebrows. You know who he is, but it's his back, right? And it's, you know, I've printed this. I've made some special prints of this, and printed this, you know, 6 feet tall, and it's a very, very stunning fine art print. This was an ad campaign I did recently. We're going to let my phone ring. We went out to the desert, and I wanted this very sort of otherworldly scenario here that looked very, you know, that just looked very space age. And this was something I just shot with the Panasonic GH4. This was a campaign for them. All right, so the art of family photography, right? And this is, you know, this is the tricks and what's needed and what is going to help you and all of that. So these images, this is my family. I have a sort of a mixed, my kids, my older son is from my first marriage. My daughter is from my ex-wife, and we adopted a little girl from China. So these are actually my kids. They're all very, very close. They, you know, even as my son's now 22, even as an adult, and my daughter's 18. This one, little one who was 10, is 18. But they're very, very close, and that helps, right? That's your first thing. It's like those magic moments that happen when children are close, and you can get them close, and they can have experiences together, and then you're there to capture it in the best way possible. So this is my little adopted girl and my older son. The feelings are genuine there between them. They love hanging out together. She worships him. Not quite as at 14 does she as she did when she was a little baby. But so what we need to do here is make sure we capture these moments in the best way possible. So you saw that first slide. That first slide was about making sure you have clean backgrounds, right? So that's really, really important. This is this image and the image before it. We have very, very clean backgrounds on it. We don't have a lot of things behind their head distracting them. We don't have things sticking out behind their head. I try to pare down the picture so the picture focuses on the emotional content and the content in the photograph, right? This was actually, I mean, this is an optimal shoot. This was shot for Apple for the iLife software, and we rented a boat and went out and did these pictures. And I have some pictures that are just on vacation also. But obviously, if you're in situations like this, if someone's invited you on a sailboat, or you have a sailboat, or, you know, to take the time to set up and create these moments and capture them in a good way is really helpful. So you also notice in this past picture here that the light's high. It's not a good time. The lights are pretty high. It's pretty harsh. But what I'm doing here also is I'm making sure the light is behind me, that people's faces are in open shade, right? And the sun acts as a backlight and it acts as a backlight and an edge light for the photograph, and everything that's reflected around me becomes the face light, right? So that's the case. I might have put these title cards in backwards. That's the after the picture instead of before. That's the case here. And here we have, again, we're in an open shade situation, and sometimes I do that. There's Sunbounce makes some wonderful small lighting things. They make reflectors, but they also make um, silks, something that you can put over and block the sunlight. Here we've silked the sunlight and created open shade, right? And the background behind is out of focus. This is my middle daughter and her sister and my son. And these images work really, really well because I'm using long lenses. This is my ex-wife and my daughter, right? Again, they're backlit. There's enough light reflecting into the photograph, and I'm using long lenses. I'm really, really using long lenses to blow out the backgrounds, to focus on the kids, to make the backgrounds go out of focus, and to really keep the attention on the children. You'll notice this background on this one is not so clean, but the fact that I'm using a longer lens and a shallow enough depth of field helps. The other trick I like to do is use a graduated filter. I don't know if you guys know what a graduated filter is, but a graduated filter is another way to control light, especially if you're in one of these boat situations or outside and you want to bring down the sky. The first thing for me that takes away the spontaneity of family portraits is trying to set up a lot of lights. I mean, I could do that with actors, and actors are professional, and they'll work the shot until I get it. But if you start dragging down a moment with kids, with civilians that are not professionals, and they're bored, so I can set up the lights, and a celebrity or talent or a model knows to go. The kids are going already. You want to just be able to capture it without setting up lights and do that. So I'll use a graduated filter. Like this is an example of where I use the graduated filter. And I've got that backlight going, and look at what that graduated filter does to the sky. It just brings down the sky nicely. It just helps balance the photograph. So the sky's not white and blown out. I've got the same situation as I did before with my son and younger daughter, with Dakota and Zoe, where the sky is white. Here, this picture with Sophia captaining the ship. I've used the graduated filter, and that graduated filter has brought down the exposure of the sky, especially since the sun is in the sky behind you and it's so blown out. Gives a little balance, and since it fits right on the camera easily, it gives you the ability to just walk around with it, right? I use really nice Tiffin glass cinema filters. I know Tiffin makes some screw-on filters also. The thing about these grads is that when you use them in a matte box or some sort of cinema tool, you can slide that area of transition, the area where the neutral density is to the clear part, and you can put it and perfectly place it in the photograph. Here, it's not halfway through, it's just on the top. So the other trick I do too is I'm always trying to use a shallow depth of field. I think that especially if you have a lot of detail and backgrounds. Now, I've showed you my long lens shots, and if you're using a 200 millimeter lens, the background naturally goes out of focus, even at f8. But here's a picture that's a wide angle, right? It's a beautiful moment. My daughter Sophia is hanging on that rope. We set it up, but she really hits the eye contact and really makes really makes for a moment. It's just a great moment. And I've got, I believe, a little reflector in there, but The trick of this picture, right, the real trick, there might not even be a reflector. That might just be the bounce light back. I don't quite remember. But the real trick of this picture is look at that confusing background. Look at the sailboat behind. Look at all the lines going on, and they don't bother you because they're out of focus. So on a wide-angle lens or a 50-millimeter lens, to get everything out of focus, you have to do two things. You have to bring your shutter speed up. So here's a perfect situation where you're not capturing action, but shooting at a 2,000th is going to be pretty good, because if you're shooting at a 2,000th, you're going to be at f4 or whatever the corresponding f2.8, something like that, whatever the corresponding f-stop is. The other trick you can do here too, we talk about having possibly a matte box or a series of screw-on filters, is to use a neutral density filter. I did this other day. I had a corporate portrait to shoot. The windows were dirty in this office, and I wanted shallow depth of field. And I put a one-stop neutral density filter. This looks more like a three-stop, but they come in different flavors, different densities. Kodak, for some reason, I was just discussing this with my assistant, Kodak, for some reason, when they named neutral density filters, they came up with a weird naming scenario. A 0.3 is a one-stop, a 0.6 is a two-stop, a 0.9 is a three-stop. I have no idea why. I'm sure there's someone out in the audience that might know, but to have some of these will give you the ability to do very shallow images with shallow depth of field like this, and I think, you know, that helps. Shooting wide open, obviously making sure you're sharp in the eyes. The eyes are always the focal place, always. Bottom eyelashes are my favorite, because the top eyelashes, if they're long, will actually could make you out of focus. Either the pupil itself or the bottom eyelashes need to be in focus, right? So that neutral density filter helps you open up your aperture, right? Here's another situation like this, right? Midday, bright sun. You know, Zoe's got her little necklace in her mouth. It's a cute picture. Sun's not horrible, right? I think I might be filling it in with a card on the side. Sun's not horrible, but it's still got. I'm not shooting at f11 at 125 or 250. I'm shooting at 2,000 at f4, or a 2,000, depending on how fast your camera goes up, 2,000, and I've got a neutral density filter on it at f4. I mean, those are the things that you need to do to get this kind of shallow depth of field. Shooting either at 2, 2.8, 3.2, those are really nice f-stops. Being just one f-stop from open is a nice place to be. Fully open is not your sharpest point in the lens. Fully closed is not your sharpest point in the lens. Usually lenses work best in the mid-range of the f-stop, but by closing down just one stop, you get the optimal performance out of the lens, and you still have very shallow depth of field. That's Avalon behind you in Catalina, and it's all out of focus, right? And we talked about this a little bit, the use of long lenses. I've got the title card here and more images. This is a super long lens. This is a 200 millimeter lens. Like, this is an 80 or 70 to 200, and this is just, I've backed way up, and I'm shooting as long as possible. Same thing here, right? Open shade and long lens. Everything just blows out in the background, right? And I've added her flip-flops. She's holding them just for a little sense of humor, like, and a little color, a little pop of color, so that everything in this shot is not blue. You also want to use high shutter speed not just for issues of depth of field, but when you have action, right? You don't want to be shooting this at 125. You want to be shooting this at 500 or 1,000, and this is in Hawaii. This was not part of that Apple shoot. This is just a moment in Hawaii with my little one when she was a baby. And we were at a kids park, and I had the duty of giving their mom some time off. I took them to the kids park, and I brought the camera, right? Those are the natural scenarios where you take the camera and you know there's going to be photo opportunities, right? And then towards the goal of, all right, I've shown you how to possibly deal with bad light. You know, we use long lenses, we put it behind us, we might use a reflector, and again, the sun bounce tools are very, very nice. They make small reflectors that fold up, and you set up like a little stretcher. A reflector that's a disc, those PhotoFlex reflectors that pop up, are not very good, and here's why. When you're using a disc, it's not rigid enough, and it's hard to focus. The disc twists, and you can't focus a beam of light, whether it's from the soft white side or from a shiny side. The best reflector is something that is rigid, and the sun bounce reflectors allow you to carry it and make it portable, put it in a little bag, and then set it up, and it's a rigid reflector. You know, when I'm shooting a TV commercial or a web spot or doing any sort of motion thing, a movie, we're using shiny boards. We're using reflectors that are really, really they're shiny boards. They're hard, and they're mirrored surfaces, and those are so focusable that they really, really help direct the light, and they can be from far away. This is the same thing. So, all right, so now you have all the tricks of how to deal with bad light, but the best light is magic hour. And what is magic hour? Everyone, you know, how do we define magic hour? It's a movie term. Magic hour is that moment from sunrise to the hour after, and the hour before sunset to sunset. And there's many things you can do, but at that point, in other words, you can, if you wanted to strobe a portrait of your family, and you can have the sunset in the background or the sunrise in the background, but that last hour of light, the sun is low enough and warm enough that it's just gorgeous. I mean, this obviously is a magic hour shot of the flag on the boat, and you can see that the sun is obscured by the clouds back there, but it is like, you know, maybe an inch off the horizon, and that's a beautiful time of day to do family portraits, to just photograph in general. Here I'm using a slow shutter speed to give the flag movement, to give the water movement, and to put movement in the photograph in general. But here is another one of those magic hours, magic hour shots where the light's really, really low. And this is a natural moment, you know. So I encourage you to always carry your camera around with you. I'm in Hawaii with family, doing a tour of a plantation on Kauai, and the light is just beaming in here through window and door, and Zoe picks up a ukulele. I didn't stage this. It's almost like too cute to stage, right? It's like, it's unbelievable. But the light, the fact that that light's so low, it's under the hat, it's coming in through her hair, the shadows are long, the window shadow in the background is long. That sort of stuff is really, you know, what magic hour is about, when the light's low and just gorgeous, and you can have the light on someone's face. right? You can use the light going across someone's face, and the shadows that that creates are just beautiful. The thing with noon light and times a day that are not great is you get those dirty eye sockets. You get an eye socket that's just got shadows in it, and you really can't correct for that. Putting a flash on the camera, I still see the shadow there. So, my techniques, again, are put the light behind them, turn them around so the light's behind them, and still use a reflector of some sort. Use long lenses, but really the most optimal thing to do is to shoot at the right time of day. So, and then lastly, you want to make sure that if you see something, you capture it, right? I saw this going on, and my ex-wife and my daughter Zoe were preparing for some sort of social event that Zoe was invited to, and I saw them doing their hair, and I just, like, it was a funnier picture to have Zoe play that in a very deadpan. She couldn't stop laughing, and as a kid, she doesn't stop laughing, but for me, this picture, she really, 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 like, I wanted to play it deadpan. I wanted to play it so that it's a very, straight expression, which makes it funny, right? Here, we're in Hawaii, we're in Kauai with family friends, and all the kids are little, and I see this, right? This is just, again, the light's low, that time of day. You can notice even with the feet, it's shallow depth of field, and they're all playing around in the sand. I might have composed this a little bit, but it was just like, it was just too cute not to photograph. This is Sophia. We buried Zoe in the sand, and this is Sophia playing around with her like a tiger. So these are the magic moments that ultimately, those innocent, undisturbed moments that you want to make sure you capture. And here's Zoe in the sand, playing around and laughing. You notice these are just both nice open shade, sometimes when the sun sets, you're just in pockets of open shade, but the sky is still orangey and not blue, and that open shade is warm and really nice. There's those of you who do your own Photoshop work, there's two things to consider, or one thing to consider. I never worry about making global changes to a file, right? Changing color on a file is really easy overall. But if you see a beautiful picture and it's lit by fluorescent light for some reason of your kids, you're going to have a green light, and if you correct it, everything else is going to go magenta, or the lights are going to be screwy. So I always try to keep that in mind, and it's just, I want to plant a little seed that global changes are really easy. Specific changes of light and color in an area are a little more difficult. So, and then this is just an iPhone photo. This is her in a neighbor's pool where she had lost both front teeth. There are all these apps for the iPhone that say, the best camera. The best camera is the one you have with you all the time. And you know what? There's a certain part of that's true. I carry around a little Panasonic Lumix G1, and I love it. I put on one of the Leica zoom lenses that's made for the GH4, and I'm able to carry around a little tiny camera, but sometimes it's in the car. Sometimes it's in the hotel room. Sometimes and the one camera you do have with you all the time is your phone. So you want to be able, it doesn't matter what you're capturing with it. You're not a bad photographer because you've left your G1 in the hotel room. It's much better, I think, to capture the moments, even if it's with your phone, than not. So I think that's the goal, and this is, one of those magic moments. This is one of those magic moments that I've caught with just the with just my iPhone. So, okay, let's do a Q&A. It's 10:35. We have about
Okay.
20 minutes to do a Q&A.
All right, Michael, that was so clear, concise, and I can say you're a good educator. You've done this a lot in the past. You've written a book, so everyone, hope you guys enjoyed it. We have the portrait photography guru himself with us today. So there's a lot of questions already coming in, but please feel free to add more questions. We have 20 more minutes to go, 25 minutes or so. So I think we have good time for questions. And Michael, what I'm going to do right now is just start going through the questions we already have. And as we go through them, I'll ask you. You can get back to us. And then as we go through them, there's going to be more questions coming in. So
yeah, no worries.
Cool. All right. Those are really beautiful photos, and before we jump into the questions, right? So one quick point. So if there's anybody out there that's getting started with portrait photography, right? They're thinking about this. How do I do it? I have no idea. I'm just going to get started. What do you think are 3 top things one needs to be thinking about if they want to get into this route?
We're talking about using long lenses. We're talking about having the ability to change a lens, having good lenses that can handle backlight. I'm a big fan of getting the components and having them, and for me, as a professional photographer, most of those components are lights, lighting, soft boxes, fabric grids for the soft boxes, and here it's not. It's having a nice medium range zoom. I love the size of the Panasonic Lumix GH4. I think that's an incredible value for anyone looking for a camera. It shoots 4K video, and it's all Leica glass. You're looking at some of the other manufacturers, and you have Leica lenses on all the Panasonic cameras. They were either designed by Leica and have a Panasonic brand on them, or they're actually branded Leica. But it's amazing glass. Then I think if you're out there doing this, I don't like the look of strobe. I think getting a sun swatter, a smaller sun swatter, which is the sun-bounced silk that you can put overhead to shade from harsh sunlight, and maybe a couple of small. I don't think you need a lot. I think you need one white/silver reflector, and to get like one of the smaller sun-bounced, but not the flexible ones, the ones on a frame, as we talked about. And then lastly, I think that and 2 more things, and we're going to talk about cards and SanDisk, but I think a good matte box, if you can get into a system where you screw something on the camera and you're able to use graduated filters and put neutral density filters on there, that's helpful. You cannot use a graduated filter that's screw-in, though, because you can't slide the top of it back and forth. All right, this is more advanced. A lot of you aren't going to want to get like a matte box system to do that with, but at least have screw-in neutral density filters. And then you want a good card. You want to have a SanDisk card in there. You want to have something that you're going to capture moments on. And I've got to tell you, guys, with your card, that you don't go and delete images off the card. You don't mess with the card. A card, this is very important because you'll corrupt your data. A card is something to fill up, to download. I use a system called Pro Storage, where I actually archive all my images on Bear Drive, and I put them on 2 separate Bear Drives with a reader, and I put them in a piece of what's called Pro Storage foam. You can get that on getprostorage.com. Go to getprostorage.com, and you've got, you'll be able to order that. And I um, I'm very meticulous with my cards. The SanDisk cards are bulletproof, they're sturdy, but you don't want to be deleting images on and off the card. You want to download the card. You want to put it on 2 bare hard drives. You want to put one of these drives in your office, one in, somewhere else, and maybe in your home, and buy 2 pieces of Pro Storage anti-static foam and do this, and then you want to reformat the card every time you shoot. This is really, really important. You want to start off with the card clean and ready to accept photography and formatted for the particular camera. So.
Cool. All right. So, we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to jump.
All right, I'll make
all
it
right.
shorter then after that.
So we have one from Ismail here. So this is about lenses, and I know we're talking about lenses here. So do you consider the 15-foot rule for lens selection, like standing 15 feet away from subject, no matter if you use 35 millimeter or 200 millimeter lens?
I don't consider any of those rules. Every situation is different. Every situation is different, and I compose the image for what works. Like, I throw all of those rules out of the window. It's like, you want to look in the lens, you want to see what's in the lens, and if you need to move in closer to capture it, move in closer to capture it. If you don't have a long enough lens, move in closer, right? If the background's too sharp, open up your aperture and open up your aperture and make your shutter speeds faster. I think that I think that making a hard and fast rule when your environment changes all the time, your subject matter changes all the time. How do you relate that to a baby, from a baby to an adult? Like, those rules to me are magic bullets that aren't really helpful. I mean, the art of photography is seeing, and I think that everyone needs to start looking really carefully.
All right. The next one is from Elaine, and this is a little tricky because it touched upon the magic hours here. So, can you talk a bit more about shooting indoors when it's not the magic hour?
Yeah, I mean, if you're shooting indoors, well, Elaine, I think that if you ever get sunlight through your windows at magic hour, that's the time to shoot indoors, right? If you have beautiful natural sunlight pouring in, and even a sheer curtain, these are the times to take an ISO on a camera up to 400 or 800, nothing crazy that's going to get a lot of noise, but to take an ISO on the camera and push it up and possibly use that natural light that's pouring into the window. I mean, this is a whole nother class to talk about shooting with strobe indoors. I'm a big proponent of strobe, but it's, that's a whole nother webinar at one point. You could try putting a flash on the camera and bouncing it off of a wall, as long as the wall is white. But I think that, here's a really great way to shoot indoors, is to use the natural light coming through some big windows.
All right. The next one's from Helen. So this is about the photos you just showed us, right? Are these pictures straight from the camera, or was there any post-production done on them?
There's always post-production done, but it's not heavy. I never do. I mean, realize I always shoot raw, right? That's for starters, and the file has to be processed. It's usually flatter than you want. The color's not right. You have to white balance it. I use an X-Rite little mini color checker often, and I'll pop it in the frame. It just goes in my back pocket. Someone will hold it, and so they have to be white balanced. They have to be, I often do things like the vignette in Lightroom, right, and put that vignette around it just to keep the corners down. But they're not heavily composited, excuse me. They're not heavily manipulated, but there is traditional darkroom work done on it, burning and dodging and that sort of thing.
Cool. And here's an important one, something that I've been wanting to ask you as well. And this is from Robert, right? Thanks for sharing your family moments. How do you make a connection with a subject that you're meeting for the first time? How do you make them feel comfortable so to achieve the best results, right? If it's not your family, that is.
That's part of my daily job every day, right? So that's the job with a model or a celebrity talent or a business person. And I think the first way is just being natural and down to earth. I mean, I started this business incredibly shy, and I've learned to be charismatic and relaxed and down to earth with people. And I think that that's really, really important. I think that um, like when I start a shoot, and if it's with a civilian, and I would have to do, I'm imagining that I would be doing a family portrait. I really don't do commissioned family portraits. Um, it would take a lot of money for me to do something like that. But I would just sit down with the people and bond with them, talk about what their expectations are, and then give them an idea of what the day's going to be like. It's like kindergarten when the teacher told you what to expect for the day. I think that makes people relax and at ease. Okay, we're going to shoot for an hour, then I want to take you to this great location. Your hair and makeup's going to take an hour. I'd like to start with clothes out of your wardrobe. Whatever it is, I think really good communication just makes the whole situation relaxed. And if you've got someone who's stiff or whatever, it's your job to really get them to feel comfortable with you.
All right. The next one's from Jason. We'll talk about lighting here. So do you use handheld light meters for getting proper light settings for a shot, or do you just do trial and error, then do some work with the post-production?
Um, that's a really good question. And when I'm setting up 4 lights for an environmental portrait for a business magazine or for an ad campaign, we always have the light meter out. Always, always, always have the light meter out. We're reading, I know my range, using a light meter is much more accurate and helpful. And I would basically say, if you're okay with doing it, do it. It's a great tool. Now remember, you want to use an incident meter. You want to use that bulb on the meter that is the half circle that's frosted white. Now, so that everyone here understands what that half circle and frosted white does, it does 2 things. It's in the shape of a face. That's why it's a circle like that. So if the light's coming from the side, it's doing an average of the shadow and the highlight. But the other thing is, by putting it at the subject, you're actually empirically reading, like very accurately, scientifically reading the light hitting the subject, not the light reflecting back into the camera. This is an old thing that I learned in my first photography classes, that if you have a polar bear in a snowstorm, that the meter in the camera is going to want to make that middle gray, because that's what it's made to do. It's a reflective meter. It can only it can only make things an aggregate and the middle ground, right? And then if you have, a grizzly bear in the black forest, that's going to make things way too bright, right? That's not going to really render the tonality. So an incident meter accurately measures not the light reflecting back, which can be changed by the things in the photograph, but it accurately measures the light at the subject, and that's really important.
All right, thank you, Jason, for the question. Next one's from April. We'll talk about shallow depth of field here. So when you use a shallow depth of field and there is more than one person, how do you get them both in focus, or how do you choose which person should be in focus?
I mean, if you notice those pictures with those long lenses, the people in the pictures are at the same level. I mean, that's one technique, right? Or you saw, let's go backwards a little bit, because this is a good, let's see if I can do this and go backwards. This is a good example of, whoopsie, hang on. This is a good example of some of these pictures that here And I'll go to full screen mode again. Here they're on the same level, right? The same thing here. They're on the same level. And that's important. My focus is actually a little off there. I'm focused on the camera, focused on the hair instead of the eyes. But Dakota and Zoe are on the same level. Here, I clearly, and same thing here, same level, same focus plane. But here I didn't care. Like here I just focused on Dakota. Like Zoe's back is to you, it doesn't matter, right? And then here they're on the same level. I think that's the trick, or you're shooting something like this where the other person doesn't matter and you don't have to control the fact that they're on the same level. That good?
All right, cool. So thank you, Apple. So we have 9 minutes left here. We'll take as many questions as they're coming in, and I'm humbled by the response. Frankly, Michael, there's so many questions floating in. So one thing for you guys, if we're not, if we don't have the time today, follow Michael on all his social spaces. Just ping him there. I'm going to send the folks to you, Michael.
Yep, please.
Your social spaces.
I'm Instagram at Michael Grecco, Twitter at Michael Grecco, and Grecco has 2 C's. And come join my photography Facebook page. I believe it's Michael Grecco Photography. My personal Facebook page is almost filled up, but please come join my photography page.
All right, cool. With the little time we have, we'll take as many as we can. So next one's from Jim. This is about cameras and mirrors or mirrorless cameras. So do you prefer mirror or mirrorless cameras, and why?
Mirrorless cameras were an adjustment. I mean, realize that I started very young. That's why I've been doing it so long. But I mean, I started at a newspaper and with the Associated Press when the photographers I was working with were telling me that they used to use Graflex 4x5 cameras and flash bulbs, And when I started, cameras we shot Tri-X and with manual focus. Then autofocus was a big deal, and then digital came along, and now it's mirrorless cameras. And the mirrorless camera is something to get used to. It's really different because you're not optically seeing through the viewfinder. But the advantage of it is for that split second when it clicks, you're actually seeing the frame you capture. And when you get used to it, it's pretty brilliant. I mean, to be able to see in my GH4, the image, even with the strobes going off and all that, the snap and the frame I just shot, it's very helpful.
Cool. All right.
Let me add, without having to chimp. And I don't know if everyone knows what chimping is. Chimping is stopping the photography, putting it into the play mode, scrolling back through the pictures, and stopping the shoot. See, I mean, a traditional optical viewfinder, you can always chimp, but then you're stopping the shoot. You're not working the pictures.
All right. So we'll take a little bit segue here, touch upon SD cards, because there's a few questions on those. Does it matter what the write speeds, at least portrait photography, on SD cards are?
You know what? I'm an impatient guy. I always it does to me. I always buy the fastest, highest capacity, best card, that's out. I mean, I have, working with SanDisk, I have all extreme cards, but and when I say I'm impatient to download them to my computer too. I'm impatient to, like, it's not just shooting multiple frames and waiting for the frames to write to the card. It's also the transfer time to the computer. So I don't want to wait. The advantage is, here's another technique that I used to use at the newspaper. If you're using natural light and you don't have to wait for a strobe to recycle, right? Shooting with a motor drive is helpful. Getting all the subtleties in the expression, because you shot a burst of 6 or 8, is very helpful. Having that choice. So you need a very fast card to do that.
All right. The next one's from Al. So this one is a little tricky because it's again coming back to lighting here. So how would I shoot a school play in low light, where I can't use a flash? I've tried setting the shutter speeds, but I can't get a decent picture. They're always dark or bloody.
High ISO on the. I'm not an expert in this. Like I don't know the best camera for high ISO because I'm always trying to shoot at the native ISO of the camera. You know, the GH4 is 200. The native ISO is 200. Um, I'm always trying to be at the native ISO, and I think that you need to do a little research on that, on what, if you're doing a lot of that, on what camera manufacturer just does the best, performs the best as far as like 1600 or 1600 or 3200 or with the least amount of noise. So you almost want to see if you can borrow a camera from a camera store or do some test shots in the camera store at low light and see what the noise level is um, for those cameras. I never shoot at those ISOs unless it's just like personal travel snapshots at night, and I never analyze those files. I never do a side-by-side. So that's something you're going to have to do a little research on.
Cool. I think the next one's from JR. When shooting in studios with celebs, what is your advice for first-timers in there? When everyone's waiting for you to click, tell us some experiences such as these. So I think this is more talking about.
When repeat it again. When shooting.
So yeah, when shooting celebrities in the studio, what's your advice for first-timers? In there, when everyone's waiting for you to click, I guess what he's trying to ask here is, I guess when you're shooting celebrities, just asking for an experience as to if you're starting off doing that, the very first time you did it, how was your experience doing that?
I mean, I didn't just go in and do a celebrity for the first time. I mean, every time we go and do a studio shoot, we go in hours ahead of time, pre-light, sometimes the day before. And we're pre-lighting, we're setting up the shot, we're making sure we're nailed down, and the assistant's usually the subject. So I think that that's the key, that you're all ready.
All right, cool. I think the next one we have is, do you use a particular formatter? There's the official SD card formatter or inside the camera. So I think more about formatting your cards. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
Yeah, now we can move to the next one. You know what? Let me move to the next one here. So, okay, so you spoke about taking pictures on and off memory cards, right? So I think the question here from Jake is that, and you said not taking them off. So why do you think that not taking pictures on and off memory cards would be better?
No, what I'm saying is don't go in the camera and start deleting files. Like, don't go in the camera and start deleting files to save space. And I'm not saying this because I'm a SanDisk Extreme member and I'm trying to get you to buy more cards, but that's the easiest way for corruption. That fragments data. So what you want to do is you want to just shoot. You want to fill up the card. These cards are so cheap and gotten so big. Get some 32 gigs or some 64 gigs. I mean, there's 512 gig cards at this point that are extreme speeds, right? Get some big cards, fill them up, download them, store them to 2 bare hard drives. Like I mentioned, use the getprostorage.com system, store them to 2 bare hard drives, put them in the file cabinet, then format the card and the camera. You don't want to be cheating to get extra space. You want to have all the cards you need. You don't want to be cheating to have extra space by deleting images off the card. The whole card can get corrupted that way. It's the number one thing people tell you about cards is to not fragment the card by intermittently deleting things all over the card.
All right, Michael, we have time for one last question. We'll take the last one. This is from Wes. What's your primary camera body of choice for your pro shots?
Oh, for most of the time, I'm using my GH4. I'm especially directing and shooting all my video with GH4. If I need a larger file size, we'll go to a medium format camera, but the GH4 is really my go-to camera.
All right, so with that, we're almost at the end of the hour here. So we'll come to the end of the presentation. But Michael, that was so good. I've definitely learned a lot. Hope the audience did too. Thanks for all the time for the questions and great answers there. So any more questions, audience, please follow Michael on his social spaces, and he'll be happy to reply to you. So thanks a lot for coming again, and thank you, Michael.
Thank you.